Welcome to the Bible Forum. This is Warren Sprouse. I am your host and your guide every Sunday night from 8 until 10 p.m. We look at life through a biblical lens, and we generally solve all the world's problems in 2 hours or less. We are looking at current events in light of the Bible. This week we've got a lineup of things. They're going to be a little bit more doctrinaire than is normally the case. We're going to start off with the Southern Baptist. Southern Baptist Convention Committee has just passed a resolution, made a law, I don't know how they work this, that tells missionaries who want to be missionaries for Southern Baptists it's okay to speak in tongues. They don't mind at all. 30 years ago, missionaries and Bible college professors within the Southern Baptist Convention were fired for this sort of thing. They didn't actually come up and fire them, but they had to sign a document telling that they actually believed the things that Southern Baptists believed. Tongues wasn't one of them, and if they couldn't do that, then they didn't have a job here. In the 1980s, men like Charles Stanley and others stood up against the rank liberalism and apostasy that, believe it or not, was rife within the Southern Baptist Convention. They ended up getting elected to office in a sequence of conservative presidents for this convention, and they began to require the employees, missionaries and convention employees, plus Bible college professors and those sorts of folks, to sign a document that said they actually believed what the Bible had to say. So they were able to push these folks, or at least show them that this was not the place for them, and it just reinvigorated the entire convention. But they're back, and now for whatever reason, they're willing to allow folks to express the charismatic tongue-speaking, so-called, and keep their job. The charismatic stuff is as apostate as is the denial of the cardinal doctrines of the faith. And I say that because of where it comes from, why it's being done, how it's being done, what it is they call this thing. In fact, it might actually be worse than denying some of the doctrines of the faith. I don't speak in tongues. I don't let myself go and just relax and allow the Spirit of God to take over my mouth and spew all sorts of gibberish. And because I don't do that, according to the charismatics, I'm not filled with the Spirit of God. According to the Bible, if I'm not filled with the Spirit of God, I'm not saved. So if I don't speak in tongues according to charismatic doctrine, I'm not a Christian. I'm not saved. See, I don't believe that. I believe the Bible. And I believe the junk that these charismatics are pandering to all these people is worse than a lot that's going on within the contemporary church movement. And there's a lot of nonsense going on over there. And I know what you're thinking, especially if you're charismatic, think, oh, he's arrogant so-and-so. Who does he think he is? Well, he's a preacher, 40 years, and Bible student, and I'm entitled to my opinion. Thank you very much. It's true. The Bible is not open to several various contradictory interpretations. The Bible is a written document and thereby governed by the rules of grammar. We call it hermeneutics. There's definitions of words. There's syntax. There's all sorts of things that govern how words go together, and when they go together in this form and they are these kinds of words, they mean this sort of thing. It's not pick something, whisper down the lane, and maybe at the end it won't be all that bad. It's also not a matter of personal interpretation. It really doesn't matter what you think it says. It only says what it says. That the charismatic crowd make it some kind of individual interpretation makes them the enemies of the faith. It doesn't make them brothers in arms. What does it really mean when the Bible says, be filled with the Spirit of God? Does it mean speaking in tongues, casting out demons, raising people from the dead? Does it mean that? Anybody can fake tongues speaking, and nobody would know the difference. My mother was told years and years ago, oh, no, just let your mouth hang open, kind of relax and let yourself go and start making some noises and it'll come. My first experience with this was in the 70s. And a young girl came to me for counseling. She had been literally locked in a church for 4 days because she wouldn't do this. She couldn't make it happen. And they locked her in the church with people. And they prayed over her and they badgered her for 4 days. She never did speak in tongues. Todd Bentley speaks in tongues. You know Todd Bentley, he's a womanizer. He heals people. He kicked a woman in the stomach because she was having stomach problems. He speaks in tongues. He's tattooed from one end to the other. He's a walking illustration of what Christians ought not to be and to do. But he speaks in tongues. Is he spirit-filled? We're going to talk about this tonight. We're going to talk about it in light of Bible doctrine, not in light of my opinion. Another thing that we're going to talk about tonight is the female journalist who sat down with abortion doctor Hermit Gosnell in Philadelphia. He's in jail for the rest of his life. He's the Jack the Ripper of the abortion industry. And she said after she interviewed this man, she literally could not speak for more than an hour. What in the world happened in that interview? She said this man is pure evil. She said he never stopped smiling, and the smile was creepy. She said he could tell a lie that was clearly a lie with the same ease as he did the truth. He sat too close to her, moved his seat up, and a couple of occasions he reached out and touched her leg. She said she was shocked, appalled, traumatized by this event. Now do you know what it takes to kill babies? Another thing we're going to talk about is whether or not we can tell the difference between Bible Christianity and cultural Christianity. When we talk about Christians today, we have to put caveats in the front. There are disclaimers. When we talk about church, we have to define our terms. Given a test, could you answer the questions? Would you know how to tell the difference between Bible Christianity and cultural Christianity? If you know anything about the Bible and you watch television, you'd probably see the difference. If you attended a contemporary church, you probably would know the difference. If you listened to or watched how these so-called pastors operated, you definitely would see the difference. But these folks all use the same vocabulary, same terminology. They call their buildings churches. They pray. They support missions. They have Sunday schools. They have youth groups, small groups. Everything looks and sounds just like the real thing, but behind the mirror, behind the curtain, it's not the same. We'll break it down for you. I wrote a blog this week. It's entitled, What Do You Believe and Why? It traces the events surrounding 2 incidents where men claim they brought people back from the dead. They give God the credit, but they want you to know that it was their faith, that it was their prayers, that this was something God did through them. And the question is it true? Did they do this? Can people do this? Can they raise people from the dead? Even with the help of God, is that possible? Of course not. It is not possible for people to do this. With God, all things are possible. But would God use an occultic technique to accomplish a miracle? Remember Jesus? Is an odd person. Jesus never used an occultic technique to heal anybody, stop the wind from blowing, or raise people from the dead. He met a dead person, met a party of people carrying a dead person to the grave, and he went over and he grabbed them by the hand and he said, "Get up and walk," and they did. No hocus pocus. Not in Jesus' name. I adjure you by the, none of that nonsense. Didn't wave anything over. Didn't have to make sure that there was no sin in their life and, go through all these hoops and do this and do this for hours at a time until something happened. He just spoke to them and they quit. That's it. That's the way God does it. The apostles did stuff like that too. But that's not what's going on today. There is no gift of healing or of raising the dead given to believers. I know. They tell you there is. You probably think there is. I'm going to show you the instruction in the Bible that everybody points to and says this is where it comes from. And I'm going to show you so that you can see it, that it's not there. It's just not there. Oral Roberts died, I believe, of a heart attack, or at least heart problems. He was in the hospital for 5 days. He told us he had the healing in his right hand. It was his testimony of life. If I touched people with my right hand, they were healed. Left hand, not so much. He could have touched himself. Physician, heal thyself. Or one of his buddies could have shown up and they could have laid hands on him. A whole bunch of these preachers. Put it on TBN, you got 14 people would have showed up at that hospital. Nobody did. Just in the last few weeks, Benny Hinn went to the hospital with heart problem, I think atrial fib. He spent a week fussing with it. His daughter finally made him go to the hospital. He was in the hospital for a week. Nobody came and laid hands on him. A week, medication, tests, medical help. Feels fine, under control. Physician, heal thyself. How many of these people that believe this stuff wear eyeglasses, take medication for sugar diabetes, or pretty much anything? How many of them do this? Only the ones that have problems seeing, or have diabetes, or have other ailments. Why isn't somebody laying hands on their eyes? Have you ever thought about that? And lastly, we're going to look at the United States. New Pew Research poll study indicates that the United States is becoming notably less Christian. They had to ask 35,000 people to find that out. I could have told them, one phone call. Our world is profane, and it's getting worse. This profanity, this debauchery is open in ways that it never was before. And in some cases, the preachers are in on it. I wrote a blog from theviewfromzoar.com. You need to put that in your list of things to check periodically. It seems that millennials are avoiding the church. They're the ones that are backing off, millennials. And I wrote the blog, Millennials Avoiding the Church? I'm shocked. That's sarcasm. The thing about this study is they separate mainline Protestants from evangelicals, but they don't separate charismatics from evangelicals, and I think they should. And I think that you should show them the YouTube from tonight's show when we get to it when it's done. It'll be posted, and you ought to email it to your friends, and they'll know the difference. Here's a hint. In 1960, the charismatic movement was a cult. It wasn't Christian. It wasn't evangelical. It was hiding in the bushes. Nobody wanted anything to do with it because it did not correspond to anything the Bible was teaching. What has changed over the last 60 years? Charismatism has gotten worse. It's not just a private prayer language. It's not just quietly speaking tongues in the privacy of your home. Now, you don't speak in tongues, you're not saved, brother. And speaking in tongues gave way to faith healing, which gave way to God's bartender, which gave way to people falling out on the floor in the church, and no group of men could lift them off the floor. It devolved into the Brownsville, Florida revival, where gold dust fell out of the ceiling. A wind blew up the aisle, and if you stepped out, you would get pushed up to the front of the aisle. And people did all sorts of crazy, nutty things that 50 years ago would have been considered demonic. So I ask you again, what's changed? In our world, in this country, what's changed is that Christians are less interested. There's a general malaise, an atrophy. In the physical world, if you don't use something, it gets weaker, and eventually you can't. It's no different when it comes to doctrine and to practice. Again, we're going to look at this with our Bibles open. It's going to be one of those nights. Our plate is full, and we may not have time for everything, so we may just have to stay here till midnight. I don't know what your plans are, but you need to make sure the coffee pot is running. So I say strap yourself in. The Bible Forum is about to begin on this Memorial Day weekend, 2015.